I want to talk about what's special about the land of Israel. In order to do that, we need to have the blue books to study with you a certain passage in the Chumash, and then we'll be able to get to the subject. Or it could be in a siddur also, but the blue books are bigger and they're easier to read. I just gave introduction. We're going to be looking in the Chumashim for a little bit. So.
Disappeared a while ago.
Okay. Whoa, what are you doing?
Thank you. What I want to take a look at is on page 995 of the blue books. This is the second paragraph of Shema. You could do it in the siddur also if you want to. 995. Most of you have read this often enough. I'm going to point out to you that the paragraph has a certain structure, which then gives rise to rabbinic comment, and that's what we have to study. This paragraph divides up into three pieces. I'll read it through for you, and I'll show you where the pieces divide, and you'll see right away what the overall structure of the paragraph is. Starts in verse 13. It will be that if you hearken, which means listen and obey, to my commandments, that I command you today, to love Hashem your God, to serve Him with all your heart, with all your soul, then I shall provide rain for your land at its proper time, the early and late rains, that you may gather in your grain, your wine, and your oil. I shall provide grass in your field for your cattle, and you'll eat and be satisfied. That's the end of the first section. That section says, if you do well, things will be well. That's what it says. Now study verse 16, the second section. Beware for yourselves, lest your heart be seduced, and you turn astray, and serve gods of others, and prostrate yourselves to them. Then the wrath of Hashem will blaze against you. It will restrain the heaven, there will be no rain. The ground will not yield its produce, and you will be swiftly banished from the goodly land which Hashem gives to you. That's the end of the second section. Second section says, if you do badly, things will go badly. Verse 18 starts the third section. You shall place these words of mine upon your heart, upon your soul. You shall bind them for a sign upon your arm, and let them be ornament between your eyes. You shall teach them to your children and discuss them while you sit in your home, while you walk on the way, when you retire, when you arise. You shall write them on the doorposts of your house and upon your gates, in order to prolong your days, and the days of your children upon the land that Hashem has sworn to your forefathers to give them, like the days of the heaven over the earth. What does the third section say? If you do certain good things, then things will go well. So the structure of the whole passage is like a sandwich. It's ABA. If you do well, it goes well. If you do ill, it goes ill. And then again, if you do well, it goes well. You might ask, why is the Torah structured that way? Why make it like a sandwich? You know, you've got good and bad. So put all the good stuff in one section, put the bad stuff in the other section, and then have two sections. What's the point of having three sections? So there is a famous comment, Rashi quoting the Talmud. Now let's see if I don't know if they put this in the English or not. I'm sorry? So, you have enough of them to go around? No. Okay, so let me just see. 1 second. So this is the second package of this. Yeah, this is the third passage. Just 1 second.
This one, the Rashi.
Is it the one from Sanhedrin?
No, that's not Rashi in English.
Because they bring a Rashi
Just
down
like
on
notes.
21. Ah, okay.
It's not the
okay.
traduction of the Rashi. The translation, sorry, the translation.
Okay, so right here on 997, at the very end of the first column, in the bottom, in the English commentary, he points out what I want to say to you. Let's look at the text itself, and then we'll look down below. When you go to the end of 17, that's the end of the bad section, and the very last thing in the bad section is exile. And then immediately it says, here are things that I want you to do. So, look at the bottom of the left column, 3 lines from the bottom. Rashi cites Sifri that the juxtaposition, man, that's a big word, hey? Putting the two things together, of these commandments with the threat of exile, teaches that Jews should observe the commandments even in exile. Stop there. The reason why it isn't all good and then bad because it wants to teach you something. The end of the bad section is exile, and then it says, and do these commandments. Your tradition teaches us the reason is put that way is because it wants to tell you that even after you've been sent into exile, you should do these commandments. Now, a little piece of logic. When you say even when A, you should do B. Even when you have a headache, you should pay attention to the book you're reading. Even when you have a pain in your arm, you should strain yourself to help people in need. Even. When you say even when A, you should do B, you're saying two things. You're saying that A would be a reason not to do B. So how can I concentrate on the book when I have a headache? What do I mean lift a heavy package when I have a pain in my arm? A is a reason not to do B. It is a reason. It's a real reason. But there's another reason that's stronger and overrides it, so you have to do B anyway. When you say even under condition A, do B, what you're saying is A stands in the way of doing B. It really is a reason not to do B. But I'm telling you, in this particular case, you have to do B anyway, even though A is standing in the way. So when we're told that the juxtaposition, putting the commandments after the threat of exile, teaches you that even in exile, you should do these commandments, what you hear is, well, exile was a reason not to do them. You could have used exile as an excuse. Listen, I'm in exile. That's why I'm not doing them. It is a valid reason, but it's not right, because there's another reason that's more important. So in order to understand these words, we have to explain, number one, why being in exile should somehow be a reason not to keep the commandments, and then what's wrong with that reason, or what's more important than that reason that makes it true that you have to keep them even in exile. That's what's necessary to understand these words, okay? Now, I should tell you, because there is misinformation in the world, the point of Rashi's comment is simply that if you stop doing the commandments when you're in exile, you forget them. And when you come back and you have to do them, you won't know what to do. That's incorrect. Rashi doesn't mention forgetting, and the Maharal explains it in an entirely different way. And that's what we're going to get as background now. So, let's go back to the patriarchal periods. Jacob. Jacob marries 2 sisters, Rachel and Leah. How does he do that? Don't we have a principle that the patriarchs kept the Torah before it was given? They weren't commanded, but they did keep it. They did perform it. Does the Torah allow a man to marry 2 sisters?
No.
No, it does not.
So you just got to sin for it. You just sinned.
But the Torah tells us that they kept the Torah. Who were Moses' parents? Do you know? Amram and Yocheved. Were they related in some way, perhaps? Members of the same family somehow?
No, don't tell me brother and sister.
How were they related? Yocheved was Amram's aunt. Did he come from England? Or aunt if you're American. She was his aunt. Torah doesn't allow that. What's going on? So the Ramban has an answer. This was outside the land of Israel. The patriarchs only volunteered to keep the mitzvos in the land of Israel, not outside the land of Israel. And these things took place outside the land of Israel. And indeed, I'm filling this in now, if you think about Jacob, what happened when he came back to the land of Israel? Rachel died. So he ended up that he wasn't married to two sisters in the land of Israel. She died at the first possible moment. She was pregnant with Binyamin. She died in childbirth.
Is that the younger sister? Yeah, right.
Yeah, the youngest son. So we see how, here's something, in some way, that the mitzvos are special to the land of Israel, not outside. At least when the patriarchs were keeping them voluntarily, they could draw that line and say, we accept them inside, but not outside. So if you read that, you hear that, that's all the information you have to go on, it wouldn't be unreasonable to think, well, I happen to be living in Beersheba, I happen to be living in Tveria, but if I have to go to New York, the mitzvos don't apply there. That's why the patriarchs didn't volunteer to keep them outside the land of Israel, because they don't apply. Right? That would be the reason why being outside the land of Israel would be a reason to think the mitzvos don't apply. Okay, that's half of what we need to know. What we need to know in addition is why that reason is wrong. And that's going to give us a tremendous insight. Yeah?
In the case of Moshe's parents, was there anything there that we saw punishment on behalf of?
No.
When they came from, no?
Absolutely not.
Did they make it to Israel?
No.
Oh, okay.
They're part of the generation that died in the wilderness. There are other considerations also. Because when the Torah came, things were upset and redone. They became like converts. That's a whole other story. At any rate, what is it that overrides it? And that's what this Rashi comes to explain. This Chazal that Rashi is quoting. And the principle here is, this is going to sound trivial, but it has very profound consequences. Mitzvos, commandments, come to us by one channel only. God gave them to us through Moses. All mitzvos for us come through Moses. No one before and no one afterwards can create a mitzvah. The Torah as the body of mitzvahs only comes from Moses. So now let me ask you a question. What about circumcision? What about bris milah? Why do we do that? Doesn't that go back to Abraham? Wasn't he the one who was commanded to do bris milah? Wasn't he told that his children after him, at least some of them, right, Ishmael and Esau and the Bnei Keturah don't count, but at least some of them are going to have this covenant with God forever? Yeah, he was told that, and he was commanded that, but that's not why we do bris milah. We don't do bris milah because Abraham was commanded. Indeed, in last week's parsha, Tazria, it says, Yom HaShmini, Yimol B'sar L'oso, on the 8th day, after a woman gives birth, you circumcise the male child. Why is it saying it there? Because the story of Abraham couldn't bind us. It couldn't obligate us. Mitzvahs have to come through Moses. You'll tell me that when you do a bris milah, one of the blessings that the father makes is, I'm inducting him into the covenant, the covenant of Abraham. That's right. That is a blessing that you make. You're inducting him into the covenant of Abraham because Moses told you so. That's why you do it. What you're doing is inducting him into the covenant of Abraham. But why are you doing it? Because Moses commanded you to do it. The Rambam talks about this in Masechta Chulin. There, another thing which you probably know, Jacob wrestled with an angel, the angel of Esau, and he was injured in the struggle, in his leg, And the text right there says that's why the Jewish people doesn't eat the gid anosha from the legs of animals, because Jacob was injured in the fight that he had with the angel. Is it that we don't eat that element of the leg because of the event that took place to Jacob? Absolutely not. We don't eat that piece of the leg because Moses told us in God's name not to eat it. And the Torah is only filling in, retrospectively, why Moses told us to do it. Moses told us to do it because hundreds of years before, Jacob was injured. It was not because of the injury to Jacob. And indeed, some say that there's a big nafkamina, because did the children of Jacob not eat it after that interaction with the angel? Could be not. The incident took place, he was injured, and later when the Torah was given, God told Moses to tell us, don't eat that because of what happened before. All mitzvahs come to us from Moses, and only from Moses. No one beforehand could do it, and no one afterward could. When in the Talmud there's a law, and they're asking for a source for the law, and they bring a verse from the prophets, sometimes the Talmud, if not the Talmud, the commentators all say, but a verse from the prophets cannot be a source for a mitzvah. It cannot be. The prophets don't have the authority to give us mitzvahs. And the usual answer is that the verse in the prophet is the only place in the written Torah, or the first place in the written Torah where it's expressed, but it goes back to a law that Moses taught us, and wasn't written in the written 5 books of Moses, and was written by this prophet, because this prophet had a particular interest, particular purpose in mentioning it. But he didn't enact it, he didn't proclaim it, he hasn't got the authority to do that. Only Moses has the authority to do that. Yeah.
That means Abraham would have kept the commitment you were talking about before of not eating from the side of the animal?
So according to this, no, not even Jacob kept it. Jacob had the injury, that's all.
But if we say that if Abraham lived in Israel and he would have kept the whole Torah in Israel, then would he have therefore kept this?
Oh, well, okay, so for this you have to know, a lot of commentators talk about this. When we talk about the patriarchs keeping all of the Torah, it means all of the Torah that's relevant, all the Torah that's possible. Did they have a Sefer Torah and they read it 3 times a week? No. Not really, and they have the whole future history of the Jewish people already accessible to them, and so forth and so on. What about something that requires a majority of the population of the 12 tribes? Did Abraham keep that? No, there weren't any tribes to keep it with. So, he certainly couldn't do that. And laws of the Sanhedrin, and laws of the king, because they didn't have a king. I mean, it meant the things that could be applicable to their particular lives. Now here, I suppose it's conceivable that he was told, don't eat this part of the leg of an animal. That's all. I mean, he knew that was going to be one of the rules in the Torah, having no idea why. There are lots of mitzvahs for which the reasons aren't revealed to us or aren't fully revealed to us. They all have reasons. So Abraham would have things that he didn't know why he have to do and could have done them. But he obviously didn't have the information of what's going to happen to Jacob. That's insane. Yeah.
So you're saying when a prophet seems to come up with a law that wasn't in the Chumash, it's because it was in the oral Torah, and the prophet just spelled it out in the written.
Because of the circumstance that he was under. He'd be sometimes warning the people, because you don't keep this law, you're going to be punished. Mm-hmm. So he has to tell them which law is, but he's not inventing the law.
But actually, rabbis, or at least Sanhedrin, can invent laws, right? That's not in the written Torah of Moses.
That's true, but then they have only rabbinic force. They don't have biblical force.
Yeah.
That's the point. Of course, we have the authority to create new laws, but that authority, those laws have a different source, a different type of even before, a different type of authority than the ones that come straight from the Torah do.
And the prophets don't have that authority, like the rabbis did.
That's correct. The prophet cannot make any permanent rule. The prophet can tell you to do something on a one-time basis, which violates other laws of the Torah even, and you have to obey him because the Torah gives him that authority. But to make a permanent law, he cannot do that. Only the court can do that.
the 70 sages, the Sanhedrin.
That would be something that's binding on the whole Jewish people. There are local courts also that can do it for their local populations.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yes.
So, in the case of Moshe's father, Amram, who, you say that he pretty much, never, committed a sin. So is that in respect of the Noahide laws, or because he did, extra, before we have the Torah, kept those as well?
That's a nice question. That's a very nice question. You could have asked about Binyamin also. He's one of the four, right?
Oh, okay.
There's a lot earlier. What does it mean to say that these I think what you have to say is that they didn't violate God's will.
Okay.
That's all. They didn't violate God's will. Whatever elements of God's will applied to them.
Okay.
But and will vary, what they know, where they are, and what the circumstances are. Binyamin lived in Israel, and Amram and Yocheved lived in. Yocheved came from Israel to Egypt, and Amram was born in Egypt. So they had different circumstances, and there were different aspects of events which were relevant to God's will. But they, according to that, that's what it says in the Gemara. But Tosfos has a different view. Okay, it's complicated. I'm just saying that because people who know about it should realize that we're aware of what the variables are. But yes, I think that's right. That's an interesting point, though. I didn't think of what they have available to them to say that they never did anything wrong. Okay, so now the question is, what overrides it? Well, let's figure out. If Moses is the only source of law, then nothing before and nothing afterwards could be a new source of law. Now, let's suppose we had a rule which said the laws are binding only in the land of Israel. When you go to New York, you live like a non-Jew, with their seven categories of laws. It's really, out of the 613, it's about 65. It's not 7. But okay, 65. You live like a non-Jew because, as I told you the name of the Ramban, I'm sorry, I skipped something. So the patriarchs volunteered to keep the laws in the land of Israel. The Ramban says that's because the land of Israel is like the palace of the king. When you live in a country that has a king, there are laws for the country as a whole, laws of the street, laws of commerce. When you come to the palace of the king, there are extra laws. The royal etiquette, royal decrees for how to live in the place where the king lives, which isn't living on the street. And the land of Israel is like the palace of the king, and that's why it has special laws. So that means, according to the Ramban, the laws are made for the land of Israel because of its special status. And that's why the patriarchs volunteered to keep the laws only here, because here is where the laws are fulfilling their purpose of existence. You hear those words and say, wow, so then that means that New York, the laws of the Torah, aren't made for New York. And that's true. They aren't made for New York. But that they are made for New York, why do we keep them in New York? What are we doing when we keep them in New York? And that's what I'm telling you about Moses and what the passage that Rashi quotes is talking about. Because if, when we left the land of Israel, we kept only the laws that are available to non-Jews, we'd be living just like non-Jews. If the whole Jewish population would move into exile, which happened, so at that point, the entire Jewish nation would have lost that special connection that the laws of the Torah, the Jewish laws of the Torah, give to us. And then when we came back, it would be a new start. A new start. Where would the authority come from for a new start? There's only one source of mitzvahs, and that's Moses. If you become disconnected from Moses, it's all over. Something has to exist to keep us connected to Moses. That's what these mitzvahs are doing. even when you go into exile, a place where your location is not the purpose for which the mitzvahs were made, even there you have to keep them because there's another purpose, and that is retaining your connection to Moses so that when you come back, the mitzvahs will still apply to you. Let me translate for you the words in Rashi, instead of the sort of paraphrasing that you have in the English at the bottom of the column there. I'll translate it for you literally, and then I think you'll understand. Rashi says, even after you're exiled, be distinguished through the mitzvahs. Mitzuyanim, be different. You should be different from other people through the mitzvahs. Put on tefillin, make mezuzahs, so that they shall not be for you new when you return. They shouldn't be new. Not that you shouldn't forget them and not know what to do. They shouldn't be new. They should be old and not new. What difference is they're old? They're old means that you're still connected to Moses. So that when you come back, they're not new. Now, it's true that when we go to exile, we don't keep all of the mitzvahs. Maybe that's what you want to ask. Right? But we keep enough of them so that we are still connected, so that the Torah is not a new Torah to us when we come back, and therefore we can have the force of the mitzvahs coming from Moses. Yeah, your question.
If the mitzvahs are meant specifically to be kept in Israel, does that mean we receive, let's say for mitzvah X, do I receive a different amount of schar when I'm performing at Chutz La'aretz versus in Israel?
I think the answer is yes. I think there's no way that you could compare them.
Certainly, there's still some schar for doing mitzvahs
Now,
outside Israel.
yes, there is certainly some schar, but I think that what makes this situation simple in a certain way, if you take the point of view of the Ramchal, in the Derech Hashem, the way of God by Lutzato, he says 3 times that your reward is based on your effort, and only on your effort. Because after you've made an effort, after you've made a decision to keep a mitzvah, the fact that you actually carry it out is divine providence. The fact that your body is healthy and the muscles obey they don't obey, they must do what you will should happen. I didn't want to use the word obey. Muscles do it, and the circumstances continue to provide you with the ability to do it. All of that is divine providence. So that your contribution is only your will. And you can only get reward for what you contribute. You can't get reward for what God gives you as a gift. That would be.
Overcoming your Yetzer Hara.
That's right. That's right. For God to say, "I gave you a gift, and because I gave you a gift, I'll give you more reward," would be ridiculous. Right? The reward applies to what you do, what you create, what you accomplish, not what you were given. Okay. So now it comes out that this is similar to what we said at 6:30. Now it comes out that what am I keeping Shabbos in New York for? I'm keeping Shabbos in New York so that when we come back to the land of Israel, Shabbos will still be an expression of what Moses told us. So the goal is Shabbos in Yerushalayim. That's the goal. One of the ways to fulfill the goal is by keeping Shabbos in Yerushalayim. Then you've got it. Another way is keeping Shabbos in New York so that there will be the possibility later of keeping Shabbos in Yerushalayim. So keeping Shabbos in Yerushalayim is the goal in any case. And keeping Shabbos in New York can enable future generations to keep Shabbos in Yerushalayim. So you're contributing to the goal, but you're contributing to the goal by providing a means to the goal, rather than providing the goal itself. It's a little bit like, I use this analogy also in a different context, like a deep sea diver who's getting his oxygen from the surface through a long tube, long pipe that goes down, which sometimes they do. And you're on the surface in the boat, and you're running the machine that gives him the oxygen, right? Without you, nothing will happen. He'll be dead. But he's digging up the gold, and you're not. So if the gold is delivered to the boat, and you make a fortune, without you, it wouldn't have happened. But he carried up the gold, and you enabled him to carry up the gold. If somebody asks you, why are you standing on that boat and pumping around, pumping this machine? Because he's bringing up gold. If you ask him, why are you bringing up the gold? He can't say, because the guy's pumping on the machine, on the boat. He's the goal, and you're the means to the goal. And because you're means to that goal, you're contributing to that goal. But the goal is what he's doing, not what you're doing.
But certainly I'm still commanded as a Jew to keep the mitzvahs even when I'm not in Israel.
Of course, you're commanded to do it. I'm explaining why you're commanded.
Is it only because so that it can happen in Israel later, or also just because I'm a Jew, I'm commanded to?
The two are related, one above the other.
Yeah.
You're a Jew and you're committed to because that contributes to the goal of getting back to the land of Israel. And right, listen to Rashi's words again. Rashi is they're very short, but even after you go into exile, be distinguished by the mitzvos, put on tefillin, make mezuzos, so that they will not be new to you when you return. That's why you're doing it. Kidei shelo yilachem chadashim kishetachzeru. Yeah.
Are we supposed to be in Jerusalem or is Israel just fine? Like, I just don't.
Oh, from this point of view, any place in Israel is okay.
Yeah, besides Tel Aviv.
Jerusalem is special. There's no question about it. But for the sake of this, I don't think it makes a difference.
Okay.
I don't
Because
think
I
it
know the goal is to come to Israel. But I just gotta bring my
That's right. The goal is to come to Israel. By the way, we have a completely undeserved reputation as an anti-Zionist yeshiva, and you can tell people this is what I heard in Jerusalem at the Ohr Somayach yeshiva, that Israel is special. I'm going to say more about it. It's more emphasis. Well, let me tell you what my Rebbe used to say, the Boston Rebbe. He says, sometimes I ask a person living in Flatbush, how's your Yiddishkeit? How is it to live in Flatbush, in terms of your Jewish observance? And sometimes here's the answer, Rabbi, Flatbush? Flatbush is wonderful. We have absolutely everything we need. We have yeshivas, and we have schools for our children, and we have all the kosher food that we need, and we can all keep Shabbos. We don't have to work on Shabbos. And we have shuls to daven in, and we have charity organizations, scholarship. Flatbush is wonderful. We have everything we need. And the Rebbe used to say, but you're not in Israel. Doesn't that bother you? Don't you feel something missing? And the answer sometimes the guy was, not really, Rabbi. Flatbush is fine.
Flatbush is like Jerusalem. Flatbush is like...
Yeah, I've been there a number of times. Flatbush is not like Jerusalem.
No, like Williamsburg.
It's definitely not even Muncie, not even Spring Valley, not even La Brea with the tar pits. If you don't, you have to understand that the land of Israel is special because the mitzvahs were made for here. The mitzvahs were made for here. Now, what difference that makes in the way it feels and the way you experience it depends on what level you're on. My chavrusa, person I've been living with for 42 years, one of the people in America that he was close to was a gifter. A gifter came and made a trip to Israel. I don't know how many years ago it was, 30 years ago, for a short period of time. It was Friday night. He was in a certain house where they made a meal, and he was asked to lead the benching. And when he came to the second blessing on Eretz Yisrael, he started to cry. So as my chavrusa said to me, we all just wanted to die, that's all. You're the greatest tzaddikim and scholars of the world sitting in your living room crying his eyes out. But finally it finished and suddenly composed himself. And they asked him, why are you crying? He said, I'll tell you why. Because I came here from Cleveland to hear the Torah of Eretz Yisrael. And if I had closed my eyes, I could have thought I was back in Cleveland. I didn't hear anything special. I didn't hear a Torah that carried Israel in it. Now, you have to have a really good ear to hear the difference and to feel the lack of the... but the life of Torah, the mitzvos, were made for the land of Israel. So, The bottom line is, if everything else is equal, you belong here. You need an excuse not to be here. Now, there are excuses. They're brought down in the Gemara, and they're brought down in the Shulchan Aruch. There are excuses that are valid for not being here. But what you have to feel is, you have to feel like you're using an excuse. You're not proud of the fact that you need an excuse to break a mitzvah. It would be like someone who, for his health, would have to eat treif.
Like pork blood.
To bother an example of my oldest son, if a person has to eat treif in order to for his health, would he praise the delicious taste of the treif food to a friend and say, "Oh, I'm so happy I'm sick because now I get the chance to eat Q, and Q is really delicious, and if I weren't sick, I wouldn't." I don't think he would do that. Not only because it's ridiculous to say you're happy you're sick, but also because getting pleasure from something that's forbidden, even if it's necessary to do, is something which is gross. It's degraded. So you have to feel, in that respect, that Kadosh Baruch Hu wants something for you, which you would feel much more fulfilled spiritually if you didn't have to do. There is a Taz who expresses this with respect to learning Torah. You're sitting at the shore of the pond in the summertime, and you're learning, and all of a sudden there's a yell. A boat in the middle of the pond goes over, and the person falls into the water. The boat goes this way, the person goes that way, and he yells, "I can't swim!" What do you do now? Well, first thing is look around. Anybody else to go out there? There's nobody else around. And you could save him. You're a lifesaver. Well, then you should save him. Saving a life, along with a lot of other things, requires you to stop learning Torah. How do you feel about the fact that you had to stop learning Torah to save his life? So there are two possibilities here. One you could say is, listen, saving a life is more important, so God gave me a more important mitzvah to do. I feel privileged that I'm able to save someone's life. That is a possible way to feel, but there are those who say the opposite. Learning Torah is the higher mitzvah. Yes, there's a rule that you give up learning Torah in order to save someone's life, but then you have to feel, why did Kadosh Baruch Hu put me in a position where I had to sacrifice the learning of Torah to save a life? Was that perhaps an indirect indication that my learning of Torah isn't acceptable? Because if it were, God would have arranged for somebody else to be there to do it, and I wouldn't have had to do it. It's a little bit like driving to the hospital on Shabbos. Of course that's the right thing to do. Not only right, it's absolutely obligatory to drive to the hospital on Shabbos. Let's say for a birth, right? But you could ask, why did the Kodesh Baruch Hu arrange it that my wife gave birth on Shabbos? He has the whole world in his hand. He could have arranged it for Thursday. Is there some indication that I was forced to violate Shabbos because my relationship to Shabbos isn't right? Both of those feelings are logical. It's not obvious that, and maybe sometimes one is right, sometimes the other is right, but they're both logical. Here, with the land of Israel, it's for sure that way. A Jew belongs in Israel. There are reasons why it's justified not to be here, but you need a reason that justifies it, and then, in that respect, you're living a second-class life. You're living a second-class life, yeah.
Isn't there an issue with thinking, this event happened in my life, this must be the reason as to why this event happened? I missed the bus today, so that therefore it means I shouldn't be going to the location I'm going to.
Oh, I'm shocked. We spoke about this. I have this in the book.
Yeah, that's why I'm bringing this up. You gave that example before.
Yeah, but what I said there is that if you use your imagination a little bit, you can think of at least a dozen other possible reasons, and there's no way to choose. Yeah. As I said, this actually happened. The boy told me this. He got there and the bus just pulled away, and he said, God doesn't want me to go to town. I said to him, maybe there was somebody on the next bus you had to meet. They just sort of waited for the next bus. How do you know that's the right reason? Maybe that's the right reason. With a little imagination, you can think of a whole bunch of possibilities.
Wouldn't that same criticism apply here? And why is it that why that we're trying to view it as this happened for a particular reason? As in I'm trying to are you simply just pointing out the fact that a reason exists? And you're not trying to say we should figure out.
No, I'm saying something more general than that. I'm saying that whatever it is, if it costs you living in the land of Israel, then you're moving to a second class condition. That's a fact about your condition. It's not a reason. The reason could be that you have to save somebody's life there, but it's like stopping learning Torah, according to the Taz.
So the question of why did this happen to me? In the case of like, why is it that, for instance, I had to violate Shabbos in order to, let's say, drive a woman giving birth, or why do I,
Right.
for instance, I have to, interrupt my studying of Torah to save someone's life?
That's right.
Isn't that same approach you're saying here? Why is it that we're trying to figure out the reason? Because we could give dozens of reasons as to why.
No, I'm not trying to figure out the reason. I'm just saying that just like driving on Shabbos, and just like stopping Torah, learning Torah to save someone's life, means that although you're doing the right thing, it's putting you in a second-class condition. That's a fact. That's not a reason. That's a fact. Then you can meditate on why that is. But what we're talking now about the guy in Flatbush who says everything's fine, Rabbi. Everything's wonderful. No problems here. He's not sensitive to the fact that he's living a second-class existence. In Torah terms, he's living a second-class existence. He should pine away for the opportunity to go to Eretz Yisrael. He should be davening for it and hoping for it. He should be looking for strategies to achieve it. And not simply say, I have my yeshivas here, so what difference does it make? It's not true. It makes a difference. It can be right, but it makes a difference. What you hope is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu will arrange your life in such a way that you could overcome that difference also.
Did why bring up the meditation on the reasons you were giving earlier?
I'm not getting it. Say that again?
Why bring up the meditations and the reasons that you were giving earlier?
When
Why
did I
so
do
we
that?
We could sort through a reason as to why this happened.
I don't remember clearly saying it, but if so, it's like a throwaway. In other words, there are reasons, but so what? The fact is it's second class. I mean, the reasons don't change the fact that it's second class. Yeah.
But two things real quick. Number one, I think there is to be understood somehow that we should never see wrongly any source of bracha. I mean, as long as it's bracha, like we should always take it from as it is, as a source of bracha. And the other thing I wanted to say and ask is, do we say, we mentioned before that like a base midrash outside of Israel or a synagogue or something, they are like a portion of the land of Israel. So do we assume that is actually a portion of the land of Israel and therefore like somehow
Okay.
the
So let me answer. Let me bring the others into what you're saying, and I'll answer that question. I want to say one more thing about it before I forget, because the Gemara tells a story that someone from Eretz Yisrael visited Babylon, and he saw an old man there. He said to him, I don't understand. The verse that we say at the end of the second paragraph of Shema, "L'man yirbu yimechem v'nechem al ha'adama," in order to multiply your days and the days of your children on the land. That doesn't mean the land as opposed to a satellite. It means the land of Israel. And you're living in Babylon. How did you get to be old? And the man answered him, I spend a lot of time in the shul, the Beis Medrash. I go there early in the morning. I stay there till late at night. I spend a lot of time in the Beis Medrash. End of Gemara. So asked Maharsha, what was the answer? It's a Beis Medrash in Babylon. What kind of answer is he giving? And he said, I'm going to put it in modern terminology, the Beis Medrash in New York is like the Israeli embassy in America. When you walk into the Israeli embassy, what country are you in? Israel. Israeli law applies in the Israeli embassy. You mail a letter, it's got to have an Israeli stamp on it. American stamp won't carry it. What happens when you have an embassy, the host country cedes that piece of land to the ones who own the embassy. So, what Maharsha said is, the Beis Medrash in New York is a little piece of Israel. And the proof of it is that there is a famous midrash that when the Mashiach comes and brings all the Jews to Israel, all the Batei Medrash will come along. They'll all come along with their flooring. That's right, it's just come, right? Why? Because they really belong here. So they are like external extensions of the land of Israel. Now, doesn't follow, this is the answer to your question, doesn't follow that an external extension is identical to the original. Not identical to the original. It's also Israel. But when you learn enough Gemara, you'll realize that if you put in the word also, it's only an also. It's not the real thing, it's an also, Sort of like second cousin by marriage. Okay, it's in the family tree, sort of, 6 lines out. But it's not like my brother. So it's not identical to the land of Israel. When the Mashiach will come, or when you have the opportunity, you can't say, I'm taking up residence in the Beis Medrash. I'm opening up an apartment in the Beis Medrash. I'm going to live there. That's not going to do it. But it has some of the virtues, and that's what that man was telling him. The virtue of granting long life on the land, that could be realized in the external extension called the Beis Medrash. But it's not going to do the whole job. Now, I said to you that there are 3 reasons why you're allowed to live outside the land of Israel. So as not to make this complete, I should just at least mention them. One is in order to make a living, and one is to get married, and one is to learn Torah. And as the commentaries explain, it doesn't mean it's all or nothing. Make a living. It doesn't mean that, in the land of Israel, I'm going to starve to death. So, Pikuach nefesh, I have to leave because otherwise I won't live. No. The commentators say a person has a right to a certain level of comfort, certain level of ease. I'm very old. I first came here in 1964. Second time was 1977. You can read about that when you read about the lives of your grandparents. I know people from those times who didn't come in Aliyah because there wasn't air conditioning. They said, if I don't have air conditioning, I'm not going to die, but I'm going to be nervous and upset and anxious and irritable. I'm going to have a certain emotional deterioration of my life. And the halacha says you don't have to put up with that. Or the customs here, it's much better than it used to be. I remember if you're waiting in a store, there were no lines. It's just a crowd of yelling people. And it's a question of how loud you yell and how aggressive you are. I was here in 1964. I'll never forget this. I was catching a bus on the corner of King George and Jaffa Streets. It was right in the center of town. The bus came up. It had people in it. There were people waiting. I sort of made a mental calculation. There'll be just enough room for me to get on. Other people getting on. I found it's my turn. I put my foot on the step to go onto the bus. A little old lady, she had to be 75, stepped in front of me, elbowed me in the ribs. I fell back on the street. She walked into the bus closed its door and drove away. Welcome to Israel! Wow! I said, oh boy, I didn't expect that. I did not expect that. So things have changed and things have improved. But I can remember when El Al didn't have lines. El Al didn't have lines. So it was pandemonium. People could say, I can't live with that. I can't live with that. Same thing true with getting married. Typically there, because you're going to make a selection, and you're just not finding someone. It's perfectly legitimate to leave Israel to find someone to get married. And learning Torah also. It's not as if, there are no yeshivas in Israel, so I'm going to stay here, I'm going to remain an analphabet, an illiterate person. I'm going to go to New York, I'll be able to learn Torah. No. A person's learning ability depends upon a fit with the teacher and a fit with the other students. And he can say, in Israel, I'm just a stranger, I'm out of it, I'm culturally divorced. I don't feel that I have a peace of mind and a focused intellect to be able to learn at my best. Those are all legitimate reasons to leave the land of Israel. But when you do so with a pang in your heart. Because God didn't arrange it for me that I should be able to do these things in the land of Israel. The pang in your heart, like the Tzaddik says, you're known by your hopes. You're known by your regrets. Somewhere it says the way to hell is paved with regrets. that may be true, but it's unduly negative and pessimistic. It'd be much worse if you didn't have regrets. Much worse. Regrets show where your values are, what you're hoping for, what you feel responsible to. Those are essential elements of your identity. Don't look for an unconsciousness pill so you won't have regrets. That's spiritual suicide. Yeah.
So how does family play into this?
Oh, families are very, very important. I can't say in detail, but you asked a good question. Then when you go to a rabbi to ask how to deal with the variables in your life, family is a very important variable. And it could be that, all things considered, I know of one case. It was about Tshuva. And he came to Israel to come to yeshiva. And his parents, who were not religious, said to him, okay, we agree that you should spend a year in yeshiva in Israel, a year in yeshiva, 1 year, O-N-E, one year, and then come back and go to college. He came here in a wonderful year. He was doing extremely well. I'm sure you can't imagine this, but he didn't want to go back to college. He wanted to stay and he wanted to learn. So I know the people, I know the yeshiva. They took him to Rav Shach. Now Rav Shach has a certain reputation, so this may be a surprise to you. But Rav Shach said, go home. Go home, go to college, because that's what you promised your parents. Leave the land of Israel, leave Israel, and go home. I don't know what Rav Shach's calculation was. It could be his calculation was like another case, which I happen to know, where a 14-year-old girl decided that she wanted to become religious. And she told her parents, and the parents said, you will not be religious. Not, we won't make the house kosher for you, or we won't do it. No, you will not be religious. Now she's a 14-year-old girl standing against her parents. Who's going to win, do you think? Probably the parents are going to win. So one of the decisors, 50 years ago, 60 years ago, said, don't keep Shabbos. Until you could be independent, don't keep Shabbos. Not because the parents have a right to tell you not to keep Shabbos. They don't have any such right. But in this contest, you're going to lose. I know of a case when I was in college and when I was becoming frum. We had a certain group of people who were becoming frum. There was one boy there, and his parents found out, and they took him out for a year. He said to a psychiatrist, and he didn't become frum. Because he was an 18-year-old kid or 19-year-old kid facing a psychologist for a whole year. The psychologist turned him inside out. They can do that. So there can be circumstances under which you have no choice. But it's, you have no choice, not something you rejoice over or take with equanimity. You feel, I'm hoping for and praying for a time when I can do better. The land of Israel is better. That's the bottom line.
Yeah.